So then if we go to the characteristics, and the characteristics are going to look familiar to you, but maybe a little off. We've got strength and presence, and they don't have numerical ratings, they have dice. So you say, I have 3d6 strength, I have 46 strength, I have 2d6 presence, I've got 5d6 presence, whatever. And so 2d6 you get for free in each case, and then after that it's 5 points per die. So it's actually exactly the same. I'm just getting rid of the middleman.
Okay.
And so that's strength and presence. And then you also have, these are all a little different than you may be familiar with. One is body, one is speed, and one is defense. And body is all there is. There's no constitution, there's no recovery, there's no endurance. Well, there are, but they're not separate scores. They're all just functions of body. So you buy body, and that's where you are with that stuff, period. No nuance. So unless you put limitations. So it starts with 10, and then it's 10 points per point up. And it's a big deal. I mean, you're getting a lot with each one of those points. And so it's not like it's all those characteristics packed into one. So it's worth a lot. Then speed, we still use the speed chart, but it's got 6 segments, not 12.
Okay.
And so you have to start with a speed of 1, and it costs 10 points per point after that. It's not, there's no derived characteristics in this game. We don't look at dexterity and then figure out a base for speed or anything like that. Speed 2, shockingly enough, is actually a viable speed in this game.
Almost like a Speed 4 character in Champions, a lower end character, Speed 4 is viable.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's just that people say that and say, oh my God, I mean, their heart palpitates, when they see Speed 2 on their sheet. You're like, no, it's not that bad. Just same thing, just think down, taking out the trimmings, right? We're not going to have any dead space in our segments, right? That's basically the idea. So then then there's defense, and you have a base score of 10. There's no physical versus energy defense. It's just defense. And resistant points cost more. So you either upgrade what you've got into resistant, or you buy more points, make them resistant, whatever. And then you have dexterity, intelligence, and ego, and we don't treat them in the same way at all.
Okay.
They are only rolls, and they all start at 11 or less. And if you want them higher, then it's 10 points per point. And that's it. Okay. So there's no equation, there's no derivation, nothing. Also, dexterity and ego are used for combat, and there's no derived combat value. You're actually using the raw scores in the same way. So my dexterity versus your dexterity and 11, that's my roll on 3d6. So it's using what you might think of as your dexterity roll modified by their dexterity. So so it's a lot of the same mechanics, but you're getting there very directly from the points that you're using. There's no ins and outs, no divisions at this in any way in this case. So and so you're basically just looking at the rolls. And that's so the base is 11 or less for each. Now, if you just wanted to spitball some of these things, the things for your character that seem to jump out at me are defense and body more than anything else. Because your endurance is 3 times your body. So if you didn't buy any extra body, you'd have an endurance of 30. And your recovery and your stunned value are the same as your body. And the value that I call knockout, that everybody used to call stun, because if you think about it, calling 2 things stunned is annoying, and what happens when you run out of this stuff? You're knocked out. So we're going to call it knockout. And it makes perfectly good sense to anybody who hasn't played Champions. So we're so used to making that little shift in our head about it, we forget that it's difficult. So anyway, though, that's twice your body.
Okay.
So as you can see, characters are looking at fairly lower resources in this game. And there's no automatic recovery after 6th segment.
Okay.
Post segment recovery does not happen. So the only way you're going to recover is do it.
Take a recovery.
Yeah. So and there's very, very little ways of reducing endurance costs. The game is very endurance heavy. It is very likely that that's more important than being knocked out.
Running out of hand.
Yeah. So that actually comes from the comics as I went back and read them. Heroes used to get tired. Right. So looking at these values and saying, all right, what are we talking about? I don't know if you want me to extrapolate a little bit, but or we could jump it right up to body 14, which is a nice 40-point chunk right there. And we could even, do you see her as basically, weapons fires coming at her and she's like flying right into it and she doesn't give a shit if people are shooting guns? Right?
Normal guns wouldn't do much to
Right.
her. They
Right.
need something heavier than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that case, why don't we rack? And I see her like really being able to she's a flying powerhouse, right? She's going to go into things.
A little Captain Marvel-ish.
Yeah. Well, in which case we're talking about, that's a brick wall or a steel wall. I'm going to fly through it. And
the character won't be as powerful as Captain Marvel as in the movies, but that kind of power set.
Sure. So what we're talking about then, I'm going to bump 20 with 10 of it being resistant, right? So that's going to be 40 plus 10 more equals, that's 50 points. Now, in terms of like strength, are you talking about ordinary human strength, or are you talking about being able to like heave something anyway?
Yeah, the strength would be better than a normal human. She could probably like at least flip over a car, if not lift it.
Right. And that's probably going to be 4d6. To like lift and huck a car is about 6d6.
Okay.
Your character could probably lift and probably, if they pushed, toss a motorcycle.
Okay.
Out. Right. So then presence. Well, being all princessy, I imagine there's some presence here.
Yeah.
So remember, we are starting. We really blew a wad on that defense.
Yeah. So since there's not a lot left, I guess it would only add it like 3d6. Probably not enough
That's
points.
fine. Yeah. And also, who knows?
It makes sense for it to be higher, but it probably doesn't just have points.
Well, and don't forget, one thing about champions is that the points flow in. They don't come. They seem like they don't come very much, right?
Yeah.
But oddly, you're looking at a big bank of points pretty fast. To add to the character. So
with experience and such.
Yeah. Think of the new points coming in as really, really, they're going to arrive. You're going to do stuff with this character. Which do you think we need to kind of rack up a little bit? The dexterity, intelligence, or ego? Sounds like dexterity at most, right? At this point?
Yeah. Dexterity. Her intelligence and ego is decent, but those might be something to wait for later.
Right. So let's go ahead with 13. All right. I may want to take some of this down in a bit. But right now, this is kind of our little wish list. Because we're like way up there in the points here. Okay, so let's take a look at some powers. We may or may not want a power framework. I know you want her to fly, and I know you want her to shoot bolts.
That would be most of it.
Right.
She wouldn't much more beyond that.
Sure. And there's nothing wrong with starting with the basics. A lot of characters have a framework. When I think of a character without a framework, I think of someone like Wolverine, Captain America, Superman, Spider-Man, interestingly enough, who has no power framework, and or at least not to start, and a couple of others who are very iconic and very basic. And a lot of their abilities just comes from prowess, bodily prowess. Whereas if you are wielding some sort of energy force, which it kind of like sounds like she should, then we should talk about an elemental control. And what we shouldn't talk about is the old multi-power, because the old multi-power is dead.
Okay.
That is a sacred cow, and I'm sorry to say I shot it. I kept something called multi-form, but it's much, much more limited and very modular. You have to, you don't have all the options that you had with multi-powers of like shifting things around relative to one another. Here, you do that with an elemental control, and you do it with endurance. How much do you want to pack in a given moment? Whereas multiforms are for things that really do snap into different functions. Different animal forms, a device that snaps into completely different functions. You can't customize the internal part of it. If there's a limitation, it has to blanket the whole thing, period. Right? That's the multiform. It's a very different framework. So really, unless you want a character who's got the, I can do this or I can do this thing going on in a big way. And I always thought the original multi-power was really bogus in this regard, because you can only attack with one slot at a time anyway. So what does the framework do by putting different attacks into different slots? There's no effect on play at all. So It's bogus. So I know it's really sacred, but I finally said, that has got to go. If you want the thing where you can do lots of crazy shit with your cool thing, that's what variable power pool is for.
Just with a lot of limitations if it's only one select group of things.
If you want different limitations at different times on the different applications of what you do, that's what the variable power pool has you covered. But the elemental control is pretty much what most characters have, which is, I have power over this. And these are the applications that we typically see. What would you say? You use cosmic power. Do you want to give it a slightly different or slightly more focused catchphrase that is chock full of ass pull, if you want to look at it that way, for comic book writing?
Yeah. She was on her trip to Earth. She was exposed because she was fleeing in a small ship that was damaged. It got hit by all sorts of radiation, and that affected her. And all of her characteristics and other stuff she had to begin with, but these powers she got. Right. And it's you could I used cosmic energy because it was radiation from the cosmos, but radiation type stellar energy powers and stuff like that.
Okay, let's pick one. Let's especially because we have more of that shit lying around than they had back in the 60s. So, and I'm going to say that I find dark matter a little overused at the moment. Maybe we could come up with something else.
I do too. Yeah. I don't like the way that I agree with you.
So I don't know. Maybe like Nebula. I don't know. Whatever it is, though. Whatever it is. Maybe, whatever. You should come up with something. Some Kirby crackle with a name. Right? And then in it right now, I'm just going to put two things. I'm just going to put flight, and I'm just going to put the power blasts.
Yeah, and that would be all she'd have. And over time, she could learn to do more things, but that's all she'd start with.
If we did it the most boring possible way with no limitations, and I suggest that you're probably going to want some limitations somewhere, but if we did it the most boring possible way with no limitations or anything, that's just 60 points off the top. 20, 20, and 20. No big deal. If you wanted to, we would look through my cool advantage and limitations list, which in my opinion is pretty good.